Hello, and welcome back to another episode, a long awaited episode of the Longhouse, a show about politics, philosophy, art, culture, etc., 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 all from a Nordic and true right perspective. And I mentioned that this has been a long awaited episode. It's been postponed a couple of times, and it's done well in the pollings I have done. Not that we believe in polls in these circles, but we're finally handling the issue of Sweden, both its current state, but for many of us Nordics, it serves as a warning or a case study at times. So this might be a little bit different from the other overviews we've done. We're taking a bit of a how did we get here slant. As always, I am joined by my co-host Ludwig Path.
Yeah, thank you. I'm always glad to be back on, and I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time.
A lot of people have. And of course, we had to bring on our resident Swede here, Leo Borealis. Welcome back.
Thank you. We will go be probably enjoy ourselves tonight, even if some of the topics are not that enjoyable. But hey, what can you do?
Of course, we have to remain professional as well. We're here to learn to some extent, and I can't just feed you all red meat. Got you guys in the chat. I see some names that we recognize from earlier. We also bring Burr Carl with us from Finland.
God kväll alla våra vänner.
Good evening indeed. Now, I brought him on, as I said to him, I wanted to be able to flank Sweden both from the west and the east on this podcast. So he'll be able to provide some historical context if needed, and also some opinions from the Finnish side if needed. Now, we wanted to start with a bit of current events. I don't have any cool graphics to display what we could talk about. Does anyone have anything they want to bring up from the things you have talked with me about? Ludwig, I know you have a couple of points.
Yeah, I don't know what people are sort of in the mood to discuss here, but I've just been looking at. I haven't been reading as much this week, other than these a lot of these news articles in Norway that are covering sort of Ukraine-Russia situation. I mean, I follow Aaron McIntyre on Twitter, right? And he will usually show a lot of these American headlines where they just go like straight into total madness, whether it's the Guardian or Huffington Post or like Bloomberg. But we do have some of this nutty stuff. I mean, the more I read, these Norwegian papers and read some of these like mainstream popular takes on this stuff, it's a bit of the same feeling of this kind of I don't know what to put it, like this. It is just really propaganda and this kind of Joseph Goebbels sense of simplification and repetition. I put a link up in the chat there. I don't know if you wanted to take a look at it.
I could try my hand at displaying it. Let's see here.
So this something I found. Yeah.
That didn't work. Sorry. You can just start talking. I'll bring it up.
It's from this Nettavisen, like the sort of net newspaper. It's one of the largest papers, and this is one of the sort of debate. What do you call it? Like debate. These sort of debate posts, or it's not a post, but it's a sort of article that's been written by someone who's not a formal journalist, but he is an active kind of. I mean, you see the guy there with the ponytail. He's actually active in the what do you call the skeptic community in Norway. It's really like these two kind of groups. Let's go like skepsis and rationalitet, is rationality. So it's the same kind of like
rationality, yes.
New atheism, where you find that
that's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
They're not skeptical about a whole lot of stuff, as you can see in this article. They're not very skeptical of mainstream media or of the American hegemony or big business or anything like that. It's usually just homeopathy and the Bible. So
Yes, and as I talked a bit with you earlier this week, Ludwig, that I've been keeping some of the more leftist papers in Norway on my reading list because they've been so much better on being objective about Ukraine, and since they're also so sort of clear about their bias, it's a refreshing change from the supposed high IQ
but
papers.
we could just read these the beginning of this article here, because I want to just hammer the point of the simplification and repetition idea. And like, this is a take that, I mean, when I read it, I thought it was a parody, and that's the feeling I get with a lot of these articles that are being published. I think it's a parody, but then I read the comment section, it's just like full support, 60 upvotes, 100 upvotes, and it's stuff like this. Let's see. History will be merciless to our generation if we tacitly allow a free country to be heartbroken and a whole people enslaved by a merciless dictator. And this sounds like, oh, it must be some kind of translation mistake that they're using these words. It's probably some more subtle Norwegian language. Absolutely not. Like, this is what he actually wrote. It's like, oh, we're going to allow a free people to be enslaved. He's using specific language here. Like, it's say if Russia annexes some of these, like Donbass and Kiev.
I just looked at the Norwegian version of it, and yes, this is he's using words that you don't really see a lot in Norwegian, so he's using very strong language here.
Oh yes, like they're just going to, like, it's the Bronze Age basically, and they're going to put they're going to rape all of the Ukrainian women and just enslave all the men, and they're going to run around in chains, just dig holes in the ground, build pyramids. I mean, this is the kind of language that he's using here in 2022. So, of course, imagine the following. After a long cohabitation, a woman decides to leave her husband. His authoritarian and violent behavior has driven the couple apart. The years go by, and over time, she begins to feel ready for a new partner. She begins a cautious romance with someone who both reciprocates the feelings and, to a greater extent, represents her own values as well as respecting her boundaries. This arouses a fierce, jealous anger in her ex-husband, armed with an axe.
I can't listen to this.
No, I mean, I had to stop. But I mean, you see where this goes. Like, how simple.
Yeah, simplification isn't even the half of it here, is it?
So we had to, you have to represent basically, like, Ukraine is like the woman, the poor.
I'm gonna stop platforming this stuff now.
Yeah, I think we have reached peak wank.
So he'll just goes on after that to kind of slam, the political realists. Like, if you don't do this, then you're basically abusing this poor woman. So that was the one take here. The other significant event with the Ukraine is that there was a speech by Zelensky, I think, in the Norwegian Congress and the Norwegian Parliament.
Yes.
And by speech, you basically mean that he just streams from the shitty basement that he sits in with his T-shirt on, and he can't speak English. So, I mean, the headlines were stuff like, oh, what it was a touching moment for me. I was crying and just bawling my eyes out at this emotional moment. And I'm watching the video, and I get the same feeling that this is some type of parody that they're running, because Zelensky can't speak English. So they have to have some translator basically live who's not very steady in terms of translation. And it's like this really raspy, broken Norwegian stuff that is, and it just breaks down to something like, well, we are both the neighbor of Russia. I need money for weapon. I need new anti-tank weapon. You send me money, and I celebrate 17th of May liberation with gay pride and children's march. And that is basically kind of the entire thing. It's like he just mentions, oh, well, you have this Independence Day, and we're going to celebrate that too if you give us weapons. And then it's like, oh yeah, everybody, just the consensus now is like, we're just going to blow half the budget on sending them.
This might be our chance, Ludwig. I think there's something you're forgetting here, because another part of what's been happening the past week is that he started ranking countries depending on how much they're helping him. So this is our chance to move up in the rankings.
Oh yeah, I can't wait. mean, I'm looking at this stuff and I'm wondering if they just like the politicians just pre-plan this as a kind of bit that they've already decided that they're gonna, spend a lot of money on these weapons, and they just tried to do this speech and everybody agreed that they were going to be touched, but they didn't assume it would be this goofy. I mean, I don't know anymore at this point.
Do we want to talk a bit about COVID not happening, or do we want to talk about there was another thing? Well, I mean, the prices are going to shit in like every Western country. That's something to talk about.
I don't think they're going to shit. They're coming up to reality, aren't they?
Well, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and what you see now is essentially just the price rises on the manufacturing side from essentially 3 quarters away. So essentially, what we see now are price rises that essentially occurred on the production side in August, September last year.
Yes,
because depending a little bit of which sector it is, and if it's in energy or food production, the lag between the production price going up to
and the
where
lag
the
of
consumer price goes up, it tends to be between
general inflation as well, I'd say.
Yeah, between 6 and 9 months. So all of that, which we are seeing now, has nothing to do with what has happened, say, these last couple of months. These are the things that are already locked in from the middle, from the late summer and autumn of last year.
Yes, anyone blaming, anything other than maybe some energy or gas prices, or petrol, as we say, probably in Europe, they're sadly mistaken. I think it's a bit of a cope, but it's also a nice way of disguising it. Just blaming it on, oh well, there's a war happening, so then insert excuse.
Sure. The thing is though that what you see essentially on the gas side, these are the daily fluctuation that you see in the price of gas and Brent oil. The thing where it goes up like 20-30 cents, maybe up and stuff like that, essentially per liter, or if you want to say a couple of dollars per barrel. That fluctuation, of course, is in it, but the big trend of rising energy prices, where it comes essentially from the lock-in and the thing that they dropped production so dramatically during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't really gone back up to the OPEC countries, that is, gone up to an oil production that is in line with the pre-COVID numbers. So it's essentially creating an artificial scarcity.
Yes, and this is going to have. I think you shared this one, right, Ludwig? No, sorry, Leo.
No, I didn't.
Someone shared this somewhere to me. Let me. It's Lucky Pants, and he might be in. Yeah, he's in the chat. So hello. That the UK living standards to fall at the fastest rate since mid 1950s. I'm not sure if it's going to be as dramatic, but I think the point that we can all take away from this is that the effects of all of this is going to be long running. Like this is going to probably affect the past 5-10 years at least in some form of another. I don't know the severity, that's hard to estimate, but it's certainly going to be felt. And already in Norway they're adjusting the interest rates on loans, etc., which is going to halt the speed of the economy and drive down spending, etc., etc. It's going to make people have to do with less, which in some ways might be good, in other ways might be bad.
Yeah, I'm a little divided on that. Just privately, I don't know whether to lock in my interest rate or to just try to roll with it.
It's been strangely low for a long time. I'm not sure if we're going back to this, but you never know. I
No, I mean,
always say when it comes to modern finance, you gotta have a long horizon and the outlook of either it's gonna be fine or you're not gonna need the money anymore because we're gonna be in a in a post-apocalyptic society.
I'm just curious as to what they choose to go with. Whether they, I mean, previous history says that they're going to have to prop up the interest rate quite a bit to calm down the money supply. But they could also take this sort of modern monetary theory direction that we're just going to have negative interest rates and we're going to keep just pumping devaluing the currency forever, until
I
it
don't
crashes.
think I don't think they're going to go with that because I think a lot of our, the value of the krona is tied to the dollar to a certain extent through the oil trade, and since the Americans have been printing money, I don't know. It would be incredibly stupid to go to like a negative interest rate thing. I think we'd rather just pump the brakes too hard and then in our weird fashion, we'd pump the brakes too hard and then probably hit the average person in the other end with like welfare programs to give money back to them somehow. It's a strange beast because we'll reduce people's overall income and then we'll just hand it back to them through various welfare programs.
I am actually a little bit excited about this. So that sounds absolutely grotesque, but for the first time, yeah, I mean, these people are going to have less money than they had last year. They're going to have to make some tough choices on things, and they haven't had to do that. So some of the decadence is going to be scaled off, I hope.
It's been my hope for a long time that the government apparatus will actually have to say, you know what, this year we're going to have to cut back, which has never been the case for as long as I can remember.
I think this is cope. They won't do that.
No, that might be cope.
But I think what we're really going to see that is also going to destabilize the situation a little bit is the Africa problem, because.
Oh, you mean the climate refugees that are coming next year?
No. The food. We are essentially, if the NATO countries doesn't change its policy on importing, or rather on Russian exports, we are going to see quite soon quite a massive famine in Africa.
Oh yeah, that's what I mean, and they're going to turn into
probably
climate
a civil
refugees.
war in Egypt.
Yep.
I mean,
Because-
Ethiopia is already in civil war. It's spilling over into Sudan and Eritrea, and it's already on. I mean, it just has to spread.
Yeah. The thing is, though, that if you look at places like, for example, Benin, Egypt, 100% of their wheat imports come from Russia, and or the Ukraine, and Russia and Ukraine stands for like together about 30% of global wheat exports.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go through from Eritrea through South Africa, Namibia, Gambia, Burkina Faso, the Congo, Madagascar, Rwanda, you will find that these two countries essentially export on average about 50% of the wheat imports of these countries. And the thing about Egypt is that they have, since the Nasser regime, heavily subsidized wheat. It's a kind of a bread and no circuses kind of thing.
On a totally unrelated note, I think my current sheets are Egyptian cotton.
Nice. You're going to have to hold on to them just in case. Maybe they'll be valuable in the future. I think on that note, we've spent 20 minutes talking about silly stuff. How about we we get into the main topic. Now, Leo, you sent me a bunch of images that you want me to share. Is there anyone in particular you want me to start with?
Well, when we first started looking at this, doing the stream, you said you wanted to talk about the hand grenade thing that was going on a couple of years ago. So if you take up the chart just entitled hand grenades.
Oh yeah, I was specifically including clips from the hand grenade report. That's true. Now, all of the people I showed all the people interviewed or etc. I showed in the intro video are political figures in Sweden, so we might touch on them later. Let's see here. So, detonated hand grenades. Okay. That's a chart. Let's share this here. So this is in Gothenburg, Stockholm, Malmo, and then the entire country as a whole in yellow.
Yes.
Okay, so in the span of, I'd say basically 10 years, you went from like no hand grenades to 116.
Yeah, and then it kind of disappeared.
Now, I mean, we can maybe be charitable here then, I suppose, and say that some of these are accidental detonations. But that's a very... Something happened in 2014, 2015 here.
Yeah, I mean, the earliest, if you go back into the early knots there in 2011, 2012, 2013, the primary users of this guy were the people from the Balkans who are in a criminal environment. So essentially, it wasn't really used that much. But then what probably happened that they had a couple of boxes from the Balkans war laying in a basement somewhere, and then he thought, hey, we have all these drug pushing gangs out in the projects. Let's just sell them the hand grenades that we have.
Jesus. Vingol in the chat asks if the total number is that from 2011 to 2018.
Yeah, this is an aggregate number, so each staple is adding on the next year.
Yep, but still,
So
2015 to 2018, as you said, certainly an interesting time.
Yes, indeed. So
the Balkans were selling these to
all the hand grenades that they have found, because they managed to get the police, of course, managed to get a hold of a lot of those that people had on them, or when they did raids, they found that they had them in there, hidden beneath their beds and stuff like that. So, and all of them are old Soviet make fragmentation hand grenades that were used in the Balkan Wars. So they're essentially,
But were this like Balkan like criminal elements sort of using them in like gang wars, or what are we talking here?
No, essentially the early numbers that you will see there, those were in up until 2013 roughly. That were people from the Balkans. The other part here is mostly Afghani and that kind of criminal narcotics gangs, and the end of the supply chain in turf wars. So
okay.
And we should also say that they were not really. They didn't manage to kill a lot of people. With this kind of thing, it was actually more usual that the people who were hurt in these detonations, as you can see here by the statistics, were actually the guys doing the throwing. Because turns out that using a hand grenade in an urban environment is something of a skill.
Yeah, you gotta have careful aim.
Yeah, and it tends to bounce a bit since it's shaped a bit like an American football, it tends to bounce erratically. And yeah.
Okay.
I assume they couldn't afford test runs on these things.
I think they kind of just assumed that it was a kind of a, I should say, an 80s action movie kind of situation. You just throw it in there and it kind of explodes where you want it. And, well, turns out that wasn't the case.
They should have just asked help from local CS:GO pros.
Yeah.
Nordan on just think alike.
Yeah, you Swedes and your CS:GO. Let's see. Well, that's certainly a statistic. I don't think we have anything like that in Norway. It's strange that this would suddenly happen out of nowhere.
Yeah, but I think it's really probably a case of someone from the Balkans, the Balkanese mafia. When they were importing some other goods, they got hold of a couple of box crates of hand grenades, because essentially what you see after 2018 is that it kind of stops. And this
They
is probably
ran out, basically.
they ran out of ammo. Because the police,
but would you say, I mean, you said this is turf warfare. Is the turf warfare here, is it still going on, presumably?
Yeah, sure. But they have gone back
hand grenades anymore.
Using guns and knives.
Did this impact the lives of ethnic Swedes to any degree?
Not really. It would perhaps be because this was essentially just they used it on themselves in the areas where they live. And here's the little thing about these urban areas where we call have been seen on the news press calling the no-go zones and stuff like that. Essentially, these are old 50 areas built in the urban centers of Malmö, Göteborg, and Stockholm in the late 50s, 60s, and early 70s. And they are not really, if you look at a map, you will see that it doesn't really, they are interspersed into separate areas and, what do you say, delineated with roads and strips of forest and stuff like that. So in those areas, you have almost no ethnic Swedes still living, because the thing is that you can see that in the white flight statistics from the 1950s and 60s in the US, the same thing is happening here. So
and the same thing is happening here as well.
It's there's 3 brown guys in the neighborhood. Time to move.
Yeah, it's not 100%, but it's a bit of an open secret that over time that happens.
Yeah, and it has been very demarked here. Also, this has also been a policy, if you will, from the municipalities and the government to essentially, because since we when they want to give subsidized housing and stuff like that, then they essentially have just pushed them in the furthest regions of all these urban areas, the end of the line kind of things, end of the subway and tram lines.
Okay, yeah, I see.
So they essentially
segregated them.
Yeah, it has become that kind of, because they have ended up in the least attractive rental spaces.
I see.
And then, and since then there was also been and this kind of area has always been occupied by migrants, but before that it was the economic migrants who came here to work, like the Italians in the 60s and the 70s, the Poles, lots of Finns. There has always been lots of Finns coming over, as we discussed on the Finland stream. I think the Finns are also still the largest migrant group in Sweden.
Well, that makes sense. I have a video of it's one of these animated statistics graphs on the immigration populations of Sweden, and Finland and Norway ranks quite high for quite a long time until we get to the 2010s, and then some speedsters come along on the graphs. Let's put it that way. So that's
Indeed.
the hand grenades. You want to move on to something else? I was not expecting to looking at a graph of hand grenades. Let me tell you that.
Oh, but you know, we are like the Germans. We like to measure things and keep records. So
Yeah, that's good. That's why we can't get along. You're too Germanic for us. All right. So I have a lot of other photos here. What is the next one you want to have a look at?
well, should we perhaps go back then and have a little look at political history?
Sure, let's do that because now
You
I want to
can,
understand how we ended up at these hand grenade graphs.
yeah, we'll get there. You can put up the one with the party symbols.
The park symbols.
Party.
Oh yeah, sorry. Let's see here. Here we go.
Ah, yes, there we go. In any case, as you can see here, there's a lot of communists and there's a lot of, well, communists in hiding. And that's about it. Let's talk about the proverbial elephant in the room, which is the Social Democrats.
The
Who has
Social
been-
Democrats.
Yeah, the Social Democrats who have
Okay.
the red kind of rose-looking thing.
Okay, the one to the middle left there.
Yeah, to the middle upper left.
Yep.
And well, they are essentially founded in the late 1800s, so the 1889, and they are essentially the political wing of the workers' union. So essentially, the Unified National Workers' Union comes first, and then they start because they realize they are getting
So
nowhere.
these
So
are your
they start
standard
a-
Labor Party turned Social
they
Democrat.
start a labor party essentially to get into parliament, and they are essentially just the large tent socialists until the First World War, where they essentially have, during what happens in Russia in 1917, puts this internal conflict to a head. So whatever actually happened, it breaks apart into the Social Democrats and the Communist Party. So the Communist Party is essentially kicked out of the Social Democratic sphere because they advocate for Bolshevik-style revolution, and the majority. Now we're talking the overwhelming majority does not want a revolution, because most of the workers sure they aren't really that happy with the how things are, and think that they should work less and get paid better. But essentially, they have seen what went down in Russia and said, no thanks, we don't want any of that,
Yeah,
none of it. And
that's very similar to what we've
yeah,
seen earlier.
there's also at this point within the workers as a class a very strong royalistic streak. So they like the king, they don't like parliament. That's really the thing. So then you have the then Republican kind of they want that's one of the things that the left wants here. They want to end the monarchy and instigate a people's republic, and well, they are like 5 to 10% perhaps of the Social Democrats. So it goes the way it goes.
So it's a question with the Swedish labor unions. What type of labor do they actually represent currently?
Currently, well, you have the essentially it is the you have the umbrella organization, which is called LO, which is abbreviated for Landsorganisationen, so the national organization, literally translated. You have the metal workers union that essentially organize all heavy industry. You have the miners union. You have the construction workers union. I think the paper mill workers have their own union, but they essentially are a subsidiary of the Industrial Workers Union. So, and then you have all the other like electricians and for some damn reason, included in all this also are the Musicians Guild.
Oh, really?
Interesting.
The Musicians Guild.
Yeah, they are kind of a hangers on. They're not really full members of the umbrella organization, but they are in there. I think it was. And
that's something that comes up in modern politics, like the musicians' union disagrees.
Not really. Yeah, and the dock workers union are in there too, and well, they're a bit special.
Oh yeah.
Because they essentially just play their own game. They never really listen to what any of the other
I see.
the umbrella organization tells them to do, because they just blow their own race, because they know that they can't be replaced essentially in the workforce. They are needed.
Yeah.
And no one also wants to do their job. So.
Well, yeah. So how this party here? How many votes usually do they get, like percentage wise? What are we talking? Are they big?
Yeah, they still are. During the essentially from the Second World War and onwards, with a small dip between 1976 and 1982, they got more than half of the votes. So they have had essentially an own majority for the entire period.
Is
up until
the period you
1990s.
mentioned, is that the aftermath of your like slight communist period, by any chance?
Yes. Around during the 70s, it got a little bit too much communism for the common people. So then people started voting for the well, let's call them the nominally right wing position.
For sure.
But essentially, they formed the Social Democrats formed their own first coalition government in 1920, and then they just keep on getting more and more votes up until the Second World War. During the Second World War, we have a coalition government, so essentially all the parties except the communists everyone forms a government so with a representative, so that everyone can be represented. That's essentially what happens there. And if we should touch on the era of the mustache men slightly, perhaps, that's essentially where our current troubles start, or at least in the aftermath, because it should be recognized that from the Franco-Prussian War essentially and forwards, our Sweden's largest trading partner, cultural exchange, and essentially friend in the world has been Germany. We were tacitly in the First World War on the side of Germany by then sending goods and stuff. So essentially keeping up trade and favoring trade with Germany. And we did so during the Second World War. There are, of course, security political dimension for this, but essentially we were on Germany's side in the Second World War up until early 1944, when we saw that things were starting to shift. Essentially up until some time after the Battle of Stalingrad, when you saw that well, this isn't gonna go all that well. But then again, they still kept up trade with Germany until both Britain and the United States were starting to lay it on quite thick for us to stop helping the Germans. So it wasn't until 1944 that we stopped doing that.
That late, huh?
Yeah.
If I recall, Norway too did trade with Germany in World War One, but I'm pretty sure by the time the Second World War rolls around, we've been pressured enough by the Brits to cease all exports of well, mostly I suppose it's fish to Germany.
Yeah, it's mostly it's also kind of we do have a hand in why you were invaded, because you couldn't, essentially because Norway was unable to police its own territorial waters against the British Navy. That's the reason why you were invaded by the Germans, and that was essentially to keep the ore transportations of iron ore from the northern port of Narvik, and to secure that line.
Yes, I think the way if you look at it strategically and with a bit of a realpolitik lens, I think as a strategic target, Norway would have been either annexed by Britain during the war, or it would fall to Germany, and the Germans got there first.
The Churchill had quite, and the British High Command did have quite advanced plans for invading Norway. It just happened that they had planned it like 2 months after the Germans kind of kicked their kind of thing off. So they were just, oh shit, they're taking. We're supposed to do that. Stop it.
Yeah.
There's also a fun thing about the excuse the Anglos were about to use for that invasion. Nominally, it was, of course, to go through there to help Finland in the Winter War, because that was the stated reason why they wanted to. And of course, Sweden and Denmark and everyone gave the British Navy an okay to sail right up to Finland through the Baltic. But the British were like, no, we must land at Narvik and go through northern Sweden to Finland. And why would you do that besides to claim the iron mines? I mean, it's damn ridiculous.
And then there's the possibility of the strategic possibility of the coastland against, or the coastline against Britain, and production of various materials used in the creation of atomic bombs, etc., etc. So I can certainly see why that turned into a bit of a race. But let's get back to Sweden, because that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, so essentially we traded a lot, and we got handsomely paid in almost all the gold that the Germans, found in Belgium, Holland, and France. However, I would like to point out that this was, at the time, perfectly legal, because these were war spoils. So if you invade a country, take it over, well, of course, their gold are yours.
Yes.
It was only after the Second World War that the Americans thought that, hey, wait a minute. So we had to give some of it back.
Well, these days you get biolabs, but that's fine too.
Yeah. It was the position, and then the Americans found themselves as a world hegemon, and then, well, they carved out an exception for themselves, of course.
Yeah, strange how that works.
Yeah, what is it? Mel Brooks says in his film, "It's good to be the king."
Yes, or what's the Melian dialogue? The strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must.
Indeed.
Use a bit of an older take.
So I think we should also talk a little bit about the reasons here, because of all the liberal guilt that has been drummed up in this last couple of years from the 70s and onwards.
I have to say, before you go on, I appreciate your historic take on things. I suppose you're interested in history, because it's like watching. It's like being back in history classes in school, and we're talking about the current political parties, and I ask you about one of them, and you basically say, "Well, we're going to have to go back about 200 years." So I appreciate it. It wasn't it's a compliment.
I see you're getting into apostolic majesty territory here.
Well, we have to start 1,000 years ago. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. I get it. I get the point. Let's move along.
By the way, I like how it's all flowers here. I don't know if anybody else.
That's
deliberate.
Nice.
Yeah, and
if you want to talk about the history of the guilt here, that I think that's very relevant. So go on.
Yeah, we should probably do that. Essentially, let's just talk about the thing with Phrenology and the Institute of Race Research in Uppsala, because that's essentially where the entire "let's measure skulls and derive the intelligence quotas from" that came from. And this is in the early 20th century that this really comes into fruition. So essentially, and we exported that kind of science to the Germans, so that's where that come from.
The eternal Swede strikes again.
Yeah, and then there was during the Aryanization period in Germany during the 30s, there was a dialogue between the diplomatic units of Scandinavia and Germany, because there were some problems with this, especially from Sweden's side, because they said that, well, if we're going to have all these rules, it's going to be an absolute nightmare to keep up all the documents. We should simplify this, streamline it. Can't you just, mark their passports? So that's where that came from.
Oh, okay, I see.
And then the Germans.
I get that you guys are sort of friend of the Germans with the need to sort of like document and order everything in this way.
Yeah, so essentially marking the passports, that was our idea, because the Germans were like, very efficient, and started implementing that in other places as well. And there's kind of a lot of things, because let's just say that during the 30s, Sweden were perhaps more Jew-friendly than Germany, but not a lot, not by a very large degree. So. And during the late 30s, after the events of the Kristallnacht and things like that, when things start to really ramp up in Germany, there are a lot of essentially the same thing happens with us as with the Americas. That there are Jews coming over who wants to leave Germany, and they essentially get sent back at the border, because what the fuck are you doing here? Go away. So we don't really take in any Jews before the war. Essentially, we start doing that at the end or during the war, because then people get like a little bit more, gets more of a bleeding heart, essentially, because before that it's more of a political and economic persecution, and then people nah,
right, yeah,
not our problem. But during the war, and you just okay, they're war refugees. They're going to get sent into, and then you just saw it as internment camps, and that's why we took the Danes, the Danish Jews, during the invasion of Denmark. But then it was mostly because they were Danes, and
right.
So it was more like
No, it was a bit of a different
that dimension as well.
Reason,
mostly that reason, essentially, because we turned away all the German Jews and Polish Jews. So we took the Danish and the Norwegian ones. So
yes,
I think that's a nuance that you have to keep an eye on.
So this basically leaves post-war Sweden with quite a bit of virtue to signal going forward.
Yeah,
what you're implying here.
It creates a problem, let's say, of international PR during the post-war era, and when the denazification of Germany starts. It's in 1947, I think. When that started to spread beyond the sphere of just Germany, and starts to go into the rest of Europe and even back into America as well, this becomes a bit of a problem. So then you need to, let's just say, find a nice rug to put over it. And that's essentially this idea that our politicians have been trying to maintain there as Sweden as a moral superpower, as they like to say, back in during the late 90s and early noughts. That's essentially what that is about. There's also another historical dimension after that, because we couldn't really play around on the military side anymore and be military power, and then they had to have something, to tote around, and then they settled on.
Because Sweden historically was quite respectable military wise, so that's certainly something you lost during the course of the 20th century. But I think that's something, as a Norwegian, you still see sort of the shadows of the empire that was in Sweden, in the sense that you have the tendency, as you said, to act like a moral superpower, but nowadays without anything to sort of back it up.
Well, I think that I personally think that partially that comes from the simple opportunity that Swedes have because of not to get all Jared Diamond, but Sweden is geographically the leading nation of the Nordics, and it's the best place to launch invasions in all directions.
Sure.
Even starting in the pre-Roman days of Goths attacking everywhere.
Yeah, we have the strategic.
You can get anywhere.
So to say. And sure, the thing is that when you come out of this is also you also have to remember something, and that is that, culturally speaking, Sweden has almost always been a extremely militaristic power, not just in the force projection, but also as a culture, as a state. I mean, especially since we started creating the organized citizen armies in the 16 and 1700s. You had essentially every village put up professional soldiers that the village then funded, and that was essentially why we could punch so highly above our weight class against Russia, for example, which is the old blood enemy in the East.
I believe my profile picture is an artistic depiction from the Battle of Lutzen.
Yes. The Finnish dragoons were always a very handy weapon to have. So this also comes into thinking this is essentially the social psychological dimension that has been kind of hijacked by the consensus culture, because it can be used in that way as well, but the newer, more nervous kind of thing, it's more of a modern superstructure on the old strata. It's still there, and you see this essentially during the latest invasions here in not only the invasions of Ukraine, but also the back in 2014 and during the first row that the Russians had with the Ukrainians in the Donbass area.
Mm-hmm.
Then you saw the same thing. We have this really militaristic tone, both in the media. Everyone was, get in line. Let's do this. We've gotta do the thing. So that always kind of simmers a bit under the surface. So that's the thing. For good and evil, it's useful if you have the correct person holding the reins, but it hasn't been the correct person for the last 30 years. So yeah, what you gonna do?
I think about some of this guilt complex that's being mentioned here. It parallels California a little bit, actually, because I remember reading about the Nuremberg trials. A lot of these German phrenologists, these race doctors, were put on trial, and their defense was basically that the kind of laws and programs we put in are just like Californian eugenics programs. So they sort of had to kind of paint over that, and we have to own the Nazis basically by just going in the completely different direction politically.
Yeah. That's always the problem when and you have a lot of spineless people. But I think it's also a bit about, it's a bit of our kind of Dutch disease. Like the Norwegians have gone, degenerate perverts, all of them, and we are, as a country, as a group, essentially wallowing in all the bad things that we did, because liberals for some reason can't just fucking cope with being successful.
That's true, but it's certainly interesting how your history has given you sort of this like extra seal when it comes to enforcing this. That I think is stronger than other Nordic countries to a certain degree, at least.
Yeah, I think that's also why we were so much more successful as Protestants than the rest of it. Yeah, it kind of touched on something that was already there when we stopped being Catholics and went into Protestantism.
Something I'll always say that I get when I talk to people, and I know that from my own experience, is when it's doing business with Swedes can be quite difficult if you're a Norwegian, because Swedes are at the same time like very hierarchical, but also like consensus apparatus type people. There's this strange social structure you guys build where everyone has to agree on the same thing, kind of cathedral stuff that you all agree to not talk about, and just I don't know how to put it. It's very strange compared to Norwegians tend to become selfish or independent in the same ways that Americans do long before we get to that point. Which becomes a weakness of our own, because we get the just leave me alone and I'll accept anything sort of attitude.
Yeah, it's what can I say? It's a flat pyramid.
That's a very good way of putting it. Yeah, you guys are a flat pyramid. Everyone agrees that the boss is right.
Yeah, at least it's like you can't have a three-dimensional pyramid, because then it becomes too obvious. So you have to have a two-dimensional cutout pyramid, so that when you talk within the group, you can view it from the side, so it looks flat. But when a decision needs to be made, you can just flip it up, and you can see who made the decision. And then when you start to be a little bit too obtruse in your view, you can just lay it down again and don't look at it.
That's a good way of putting it, and it certainly explains my experiences working with teams of Swedes. It's exactly that. It's not a pyramid until a decision has to be made, and then everyone has to agree that one person sort of makes the call. Anyway, do you want to keep going with the history, or should we talk more about the logos?
No, we should talk about the parties. But I think that was more of like the discussion we needed to have to understand, like where does all this weirdness come from. So it's just a short essay. I've been going on for an hour.
Yeah, but I'm sure we can do history streams in the future.
Yeah,
we want to.
We'll just get some thing here. Well, let's just start from more left on this graphic. You can see the M kind of dotted thing there. That's the moderates. They're the moderate center right party, business friendly, low tax, don't want taxation, that kind of stuff.
Right. Okay. But is it like low? Like it's some of them sell them like, is it like conservative? As in like conservative with a big C and a trademark? Are we talking?
No, not really. I would say that they used to be conservatives, but during the 90s they became more like neoliberal.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So they kind of because they didn't really go anywhere. They had no good leadership, and then they got some neoliberals in who kind of just took the whole thing over. and that was kind of successful.
Interesting.
But we'll get back to them, I think. Then you have the KD blue box. That's the Christian Democrats. Kind of self-explanatory. They're the same all over Europe.
Yes, it's the Christian party.
Then you have the blue kind of flower, and that's the Sweden Democrats, the naughty racists.
Sweden, the naughty racists. All right.
Yeah, and you have the L. The Liberals, previously the Svenskt Folkparti, in the Swedish People's Party, when they used to have a flower. It was one of those blue Clint kind of things, but then they changed it a couple of years ago to a blue penis. So
seriously,
well, you can see it there. It isn't a name. It's a thing. And I just
tilted my head, and now I understand.
yeah. That when they came, it was people had a lot of fun with that one when they changed their logo, because of course that's that's the first thing everyone thought of when they saw
here in the chat saying literally taking the L.
Yeah, so that's what they're doing, because they are currently below the boundary layer for getting into the parliament. So they're on the way out.
It's L plus ratio.
Yeah.
Indeed. And then we can get down to the dandelion, the Greens, the environmental party.
In the bottom left here, yes.
In the bottom left, and well, they are Greens. They're full on, equity race commies, and want windmills everywhere where, well, not where they live, but where everyone else lives, and no nuclear power. The other one with the 4 clover is the Center Party. That's the old Farmers Union. They rebranded in the 70s.
Yes, it's the same as in Norway. For those of you listening who are old school listeners, you will remember from the Norwegian stream overview that we pretty much covered the exact same party, the Farmers Union turned Center Party, with that exact 4 clover.
Yep, so I think they're essentially the same kind of group. They had a lot of exchange between the Norwegian and Swedish Center Party. They essentially sit in each other's laps. I don't know if they have done the switch that in Norway that they have done here, because now they don't represent farmers. Now they represent urbanites instead.
Oh, really? No, they've gone the opposite way in Norway. They are firmly planted in the district politics, and that's probably what got them into the government this cycle. Not that they've been very successful yet, but they got 3 more years.
Yeah.
So the urbanites are the true center, I guess.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't know.
What does that mean in terms of policies?
Very neoliberal. They have essentially just excised their entire conservative streaks. They are, open borders, the Open Borders Party, together with the Greens, and that kind of thing.
That's a very strange pivot.
Yeah, it's a really weird pivot. I gotta, but it happened.
I mean, having the Norwegian and Finnish center parties, former farmers unions, they've still kept up the boonies, and I really can't see how, if there's Liberal Party and the moderates, and I presume that's more leftism on the right bottom. Like how can they fit in these urban centers?
Yeah, I don't know. And then we have the last, the red with a V in it, so you know who the enemy is. Vänsterpartiet, kommunisterna.
The communists, yes.
Yeah, the communists. They actually, up until the 1990s, called themselves VPK, alltså VPK, standing for Vänsterpartiet Kommunisterna. That was their official name. And then they, after the Berlin Wall came down, they realized maybe it's not the best branding. So
to literally call ourselves the communists. No,
let's just call ourselves the left party.
Nordan on the chat, I think this is in reference to the Center Party. Do they get many votes?
Well, you can put up the graphic for that. The one called Election Poll 2020.
Election poll 2022.
Yeah, 2022.
Here we go. I see. So the Center Party got about 6% here. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is very close to the.
Oh wow, that's a big part for the communists.
Yeah, they have. They have been doing a lot of populist work since the new party leader came in. Less communism, more worker friendly stuff. So essentially, actually just protectionism. No, they are together with the Sweden Democrats. I was
going to say, are they poaching votes from the Sweden Democrats? You think?
No, they are poaching votes from the other ones because they are still the communists. So, but essentially, they have been going. We got to check migration and do something about this. And migration isn't good. But they have gone from towards that migration unchecked migration means essentially dumping workers' wages, so they are taking protectionistic. So it's absolutely not about racism or anything ethnical or anything like that. It's just about workers' wages. So, and they have been kind of punching the other left-leaning parties, on just neoliberal policies that no one likes. So they have been picking up
flanking the other left parties, actually, from the left.
Yeah, they are flanking them from not really from the left, just from more utilitarian kind of, more from a centrist kind of thing. Really, it's more like. So they have actively stopped talking about communism. That also helps. People forget who they are.
Of course. Yeah. That's certainly an interesting position to hold.
So what's the dotted O at the bottom?
Other, essentially.
Oh, okay.
So it's like it's local parties. It's parties trying to. There's I think a third of that is a party called Medborgerlig Samling. So it's like a citizens' assembly. That is a real, classical libertarian party. No taxes, and no labor protections, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
That are slowly gaining some ground. They were started, I think, in 2018 or something like that. So that's kind of those guys.
Okay, so
yeah, go ahead.
From this graph, though, I mean, would you say that which one of these would you put on the right? I know that I'm asking you, so probably none. But are we assuming here that the Christians, the M and the Sweden Democrats are the right here?
Yeah, it's the liberals, the Christian Democrats, the moderates, and the Sweden Democrats that essentially are the quote-unquote right-wing bloc.
I see. And tell us a bit more about the Sweden Democrats, because I think if there's anything people outside of Sweden have heard about, it's them. Because they're the racists.
Yeah. They were the Naughty Racist Party were formally formed in 1988 from a number of right-wing and some expressively neo-Nazi groups like BSS and Swedish Alternative and some of these groups, and they really didn't go anywhere until the 2010 election, where they burst into the scene, so to speak, with 5.7% of the vote.
Now, is this due to a change in their tactics, or would you say it's just, sort of the will of the voters changing, so to speak?
It's a bit more. I think they were essentially doing this to improving their communication strategy, and they were during this time they got into local government in municipalities and stuff like that. From 1988 and forward. So what they essentially started to was pointing on the let's say the culturally conservative angle, and that expressively anti-communist angle, and that's essentially what they got into the parliament on in the 2010 election. And then they really, once they got in, they started cleaning house a little bit with the more should you call it, the rugby firm kind of people.
The paramilitary rugby team, like the right wing.
They started cleaning house, so they didn't, because they had some really fun scandals going around there in the 2011 and 2010, when you had elected members to parliament running around in the summer night in Stockholm with aluminum pipes, screaming at some obnoxious Pakistani comedian about what they thought about him, and they filmed this themselves as well, and then leaked it during one of their purges. So it hadn't necessarily been getting out without internal help, but there was a lot of things going down of that kind during that early era of the early 2010s. But that didn't really do anything to curb their popularity, because they got the 12.9% in the 2014 election. So this is pre the migrant stream, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the 2018 election, they got bumped up to 17.5%. And now they are trending around 20%.
That's quite an explosive growth.
Yeah, well, it's the eternal German coming out.
Yeah, sure.
I think.
But how are they viewed sort of internally then? Because all you see from the outside is, these are the evil racist party, and they're gaining in the polls, and this is a dark day for Sweden, etc. So how are they viewed? I mean, considering it's 20%, they're gonna have to be taken seriously, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, they are on the right wing, the foundation for a right wing government currently. They're intrinsic for it, and they have become a distinct power factor. But the thing to remember here is that almost all our media class votes for either the center party or the environmental party, the Greens, or the communists. So they, of course, hate the Sweden Democrats with a passion, because right. This is the old ideas coming back with a vengeance. These are like the old culture, the old traditions. None of this new crap.
Do the media get to pretend to be anti-government by not going for the Social Democrats?
Depends on which kind of media it is. I mean,
because you listed the center, the Miljöpartiet, and the communists. So, I mean, if they're voting for everyone else besides the main governing party,
I think the media, a lot of the media staff doesn't really do the Social Democrats any favors. I think they view them as some kind of neoliberal force. Essentially,
Yes.
the media class wants more champagne communism.
Right.
So there's that. But essentially, I think out in the country, no, I mean I think most people who aren't expressively Marxist just view it as a political position among others. It's just like, oh, okay, you vote for them. Me too. That kind of stuff. And it's 1/5 of the population. So there's that.
Does the Sweden Democrats like draw on some type of ideological tradition within Sweden?
I don't know. I mean, the ideology of the current political parties are not very well stated. It's mostly they have much in the West. They have kind of mired themselves into specific question politics, and you don't really speak about an overarching idea. Essentially, it is a value conservative party, and I think that they did try a couple of years ago to float the idea of restriction abortion rights and stuff like that in the Sweden Democrats, and then found out that the pressure from the media that they even mentioned it in passing was eliciting such a squeal of terror from the media class that they realized that there are no good optics to get here. We gotta wait until we are actually in power to bring that one out.
Right.
So what's then the Swedish abortion laws currently?
Well, they're for starters taxpayer funded, and I think it's what is it? It's 12 weeks. It's up until 12 or 14 weeks. It's kind of open, and after that, I think the Socialstyrelsen, the Social Health Board, has a panel that must convene on it to give permission, and it's mostly doctors and stuff like that. So they look around like what is the social kind of network around this person. Is there any medical considerations? And then they essentially look at is this justified?
It's very similar to the Norwegian laws, I think. I'm
Yeah,
asking because I'm wondering about like the Norwegian, these sort of like quote unquote far right parties. They are just like this kind of counter jihad, anti-immigration stuff. They have like no overarching ideology. There's no Christianity or any like type of tradition they draw on. So I see Jarl in the chat there says that the ideology is unclear. They're just anti-immigration. It sounds very familiar.
Yeah, they're very much counter jihad. That's their big thing, and they are trying to go rebrand themselves into the cultural conservative kind of thing. But they are kind of all over the place. So, and that's also, I think, a remnant of the fact that they don't have a central governing philosophy. And I would say that very few of them are at least of the political elite within the party are Christians or religious in some sense. I think most of them are, the kind of standard unthinking, I'm kind of atheist slash
secular liberal, like
yeah, kind of that with some conservative bents, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so there's no paganism in there.
No, not in the party elite, but I think there's a lot of neo-pagans in the voter base. That's a really strong current in that part, but not in the party itself.
Huh. So that being said, I joked about it earlier, but on this sort of spectrum, there is really no true right parties here. I mean, it's the same thing we covered in the Norwegian stream, that if you found yourself on the sort of the traditionalist capital T right, you won't really have any voice.
No, not really. You have the AFS, the Alternativ för Sverige, which is essentially the same thing as the Alternativ för Deutschland, AFD, but they are essentially, the scrapings together of people who were during the last couple of decades, the purges that happened within the Sweden Democrats. They are essentially, the those guys who started their own thing.
Who are bad at the optics game.
Yeah, very much so.
Excessive interest in World War II history and what did you call them, Ludwig?
I say that they should just create a paramilitary group. There's no need to have them actually be in politics. They can just have like a football team or a rugby team, and whenever someone in the SD comes out and says that soy man is bad or something, they can go and give someone a talking to or something. Kind of like how the Antifa works, but there's no point in that.
Well, yeah, that's essentially who they are. They're Antifa people, but on the right.
More or less that's essentially who they are. So no, there is no real right party in Sweden. Just doesn't exist.
So it's the same assessment as Norway then, pretty much.
Yeah.
Do we want to move on to one of the other?
Yes, let's go back to the red meat that were promised.
Okay. Which one do you want?
Oh, well, the one follows on the other, so I think we can start with the... let's have a look at the chart called Immigration 2000 to 2021.
Okay.
Start with that
There
one.
you go. So this is the dotted line is women and the full line is men. And
yes,
then the tiny dotted line, the dash line and the dotted line is total immigration. And this is immigration per year.
This is immigration per year, yes. This is also, but this is an aggregate number. So this essentially is everyone who came into the country, regardless of origin. And it is not controlled for migration.
Of course.
So there you have the number.
2016, this is the great Finnish immigration to Sweden.
Yeah, if only, but no.
That's when you came over, Berkal, huh? To shoot up all the jobs.
Yeah, I just came over and raided Djurgården.
Tried to get some of those hand grenades.
It was he who came with the hand grenades. I see. Yeah, essentially that's the great flow through from our old friends, the Germans. Thank you for that one.
Mm-hmm.
So 165.
Well, you did push some of them all the way through to the north to the Tornio and push them over to Finland as well. So
yeah, we tried to
likewise.
We tried to give you some of the fun.
Yeah, I know. Most of them stopped in Germany, and then you
to
had
be
another
fair,
stop.
we gave some to the Norwegians as well.
Yes. So let's recap here, because what happened was in the migrant crisis of 2015, Germany decided on behalf of pretty much everyone in the EU that taking in all of these immigrants were a great idea, and then sort of just letting them go wherever within the borders of the EU once they entered was also a good idea. And Sweden answered with, yes, harder, daddy. Pretty much. Is my opinion. I mean, do you agree, Leo?
It was the you know the international race Marxist had their greatest Christmas ever because they were just pouring brown people in who they could save.
Yes.
They didn't have to go anywhere. They were just there in the local train station. It was perfect.
Right.
It reached almost messianic proportions. It was insane. It was, and slightly
Well,
disgusting.
it's hard to picture because we hadn't, like, you said that you pawned some off on us, but like compared to you, we had nothing, and compared to this chart, we had nothing. So it's been a very different experience, from what you guys have to deal with the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
But were there any sort of like control in these immigration groups? Were there any sort of like, these are Syrians who are classified as refugees, these people are job migrations, these
I
people
think
are
that
allowed to stay, these people have to go back when the war is over, etc., etc.?
no, I think the 2015, 2016 inflow, people just showed up
Right.
and they just let them in. The one thing that they did previous to this, thank God, was that they decided that you don't give permanent residency.
Okay.
Essentially, they changed the rules that no one gets permanent residency; everyone gets temporary, and that was in
Okay.
a couple of years before this. So it doesn't
Now
really
it's
matter.
also interesting to point out, and Jarl in the chat says that the moderates pushed for 2006 to 2014.
Yeah,
Because if we look at the graph, I mean, it was at about, let's say, 60,000, and then something happens in 2005, 2006.
yeah, that's the
Uh,
neoliberals. The
right.
moderates came into power, and then pushed through the neoliberal agenda of trying to crack open the borders.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So
And then went into overdrive in 2016, probably
you see, it's
egged on by the Marxists and the people who wanted someone to save, I suppose.
yeah. That's essentially what happened there.
So this is
Well,
it's that seal we were talking about taking over.
yeah. Then you can start take up the other chart that is called most common migrant origin. So you can
Yes.
see some other interesting stuff there. Yeah.
Okay, so the most common here is
The
Finland
Finns.
in 2002, and then there is Iraq, and then
Yeah, the
there
green
is
line is
Iran.
Iraq. The yellow line is Iran, and then you have Poland is the dotted line that goes slowly up, and then the Syrian
Syria,
is
yeah,
goes up a lot.
from pretty much nothing, yeah, and then overtakes Finland. Interestingly enough, in 2018 or 2019, you can see that the Iraqis also overtake the Finns. Now, this is also this is if I'm reading the title here right, this is the birth countries of immigrants.
Yeah, it's
So
where the people are
this
coming
isn't
into the
second
country
generation
for.
immigrants or people who.
No. These are first generation immigrants. So these are
Uh-huh.
people who are born somewhere and then coming into the country.
So presumably, if we include second generation here, considering this is 2002, there's probably a lot of children or young adults these days who were born in the early 2000s, who were children of immigrants, who now sort of technically then this growth outnumbers the Finland numbers even more.
Yeah, there's been a lot of documentaries actually in Finland about I talked in the Finland episode about the Finno Swedes with their institutional power, but the Sveko Finns, if we reverse that here, a lot of them, for example, are third generation third generation, grandparents come in the 60s, and 2 generations have been living in Sweden already, and they're still looked down upon by the superior Swedes, and they can't even speak Finnish with a proper accent. People here wouldn't accept them anymore, and they're kind of lost.
I see.
But I would like to point out also that this does not, in any case, this graph is only people who are born outside of Sweden.
Yes.
So
this is first generation.
Yeah. So the Finnish number is still more than the Syrians.
Yeah, a lot
overall.
more. Yeah. And then we should probably look at you have the chart called most common breakdown chart.
Yep.
So that's more like contemporary numbers, where you can see from which land these people are coming.
Okay,
and
so this is the numbers of which country first generation immigrants are coming from. Ordered by number,
male,
I suppose,
female, and total.
Yeah. And so the biggest one is obviously Syria. Now, is this the count currently in Sweden? Like, is the count in 2021 196,000 immigrants from Syria?
Yeah, that should be correct.
Okay, yeah.
This should be aggregate numbers.
Interesting. So, something that we hear quite time and time again. Sorry, I had to cough for a moment. When we talk about, especially here in Norway, when we hear about Sweden and the Swedish conditions, as they're called, is that most of the issues that Sweden seems to have with immigration today are the results of sort of failed integration and failed second generation integration with sort of the thing that Burke Carl mentioned, that you have second and third generation people who are born in Sweden but don't really have a proper heritage either to their parents' country or Sweden.
Yeah,
which then sort of like
Finns.
The in-between groups.
The in-between groups that create a lot of sort of restless young men, which creates a lot of violence, and that this is to blame for a lot of the hand grenade statistics.
Yeah, but there you also see the ethnic volume of this, because we have, since you have we have almost 100,000 people from Poland, for example, and they have all come over here since the wall came down. While the Finns have been coming here since the Second World War, really. Who are counted in this statistic, at least, because there were more Finns coming in earlier, but they are not counted in this because
you could basically go with that. I mean, even further back, even in Tsar's times.
Yeah, it's been going on since the 1500s with the Finns coming over. So
I mean, basically, yeah.
Yeah, but in any case, you don't have this large, criminal element within the Polish population of the children of the people who came here during the 90s, for example. You don't have it in the German or the Norwegian or in the Thai or the English communities. I mean, they're very law-abiding and fit in well. The same with the Iranians. The Iranians have
just
kind of
want to point out something here. Like when you look at you talk about the crime rates, I'm also looking at like the gender disparities. Like say with Thailand, it looks like there's almost 5 times as many women coming in.
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
As there are men. So is this mail order brides or something?
Yep.
Right.
It's the people who can't find someone local because of looks and age, but have the capital, and then they go to countries like that who aren't that
it's a phenomenon here as well. Yeah, the mail order bride. older men and young Thai women. I will say that the Thai community, at least in Norway, is almost invisible. Like the only time I usually see them are if I walk by like a Catholic church during the weekends, or if I happen to walk by like a Buddhist temple. That's the only time you see them. Otherwise, they stick to their own communities almost in a creepy way. But they're literally bothering no one.
Yeah, so, they have a healthy in-group preference.
Yeah, so I think it's both a good and a bad thing. I mean, like you said, they make very little noise, and it's quite comfortable to have immigrants like that. You can just order like this Thai food and get good service. But I've always been creeped out a bit by their like total in-group preference.
Sure.
They're completely uninterested in interacting with anybody else when I'm in like larger groups of these people. So I'm usually like, I know they have reasonably high IQ size as well, so I'm usually paranoid about them plotting stuff that I can't actually overhear them. But
yeah, we should also mention one thing about the Middle Eastern groups, and that is Syrians. Almost all Syrians that came here are Syrian Christians, or of the various Christian denominations, because, well, they got the fuck out because ISIS was coming for them. So
sure.
So the Syrian community is actually one that is producing very little trouble, because they are kind of on the level of the Iranians. It happens, but they are not the primary belligerents, if you want. It's
yeah, that was going to be my next question, was the Syrians and the Iranians, because that's I mean, the Syrian immigration is fresh enough, I suppose, that it's yet to produce any large pockets of unrest if they're gonna. But
because Syrian immigration to this country, but then it was mostly intellectuals and academics. That started.
That's the same as the Iranians, yes.
It's same. It started in the 90s, actually. So, and that's why I think we got a quite sizable proportion of Syrians, because many of them knew someone, or had a friend's uncle's third cousin lived somewhere up here, and then they knew at least someone. So that attracted a lot of the Christian Syrians.
So that's some numbers. Did you have any other graphs you wanted to?
Yes, we should
look
the
immigration. Or are we jumping into? I see you have some graphs here titled crime stats.
Yes, we should look at. We should start looking at crime stats reported.
Okay.
Because there you have some red meat for our listeners or viewers, I should perhaps say. It's hard to listen to a graph.
Oh, Jesus, that green one.
Yep.
That is narcotics. What happened in 1955?
Essentially, narcotics became illegal. That's what happened. And I think by 1965, where you see the steep graph going up, they criminalized personal use. Up until I think the mid 1960s, if you had narcotics of an amount that were for you can use it yourself, but it's not enough to distribute, then that's not illegal. And when that got illegal, they really went hard for trying to find that kind of to get that kind of crime.
Now, the filled purple line here is the rape stat.
Yeah, that's the rape victim, and the dotted line is
yes,
other sexual crimes.
Every time I hear someone from Sweden, sort of like some expert, talk about these stats, they say that the rape or the sexual crimes statistics have risen according to the population numbers. And I can sort of see why you would say that looking at this graph, because there's no one big point where you see a marked
Well,
difference.
the graph is logarithmic.
Well, it is. Like, I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm just saying that if you look at it like this, it looks like, oh, it's a nice, fine, gradual decline increase. But I mean, it is a 900% increase.
Yep. This is also because they have done some really weird stuff with, especially the rape kind of thing. I'm not saying it's not almost that, but it also becomes a problem because how you count them. Because in most other countries, if you have like say a guy like abuses his girlfriend and rapes her like 50 times over a course of 2 years, that will be caused, for example, in France, that will be one rape conviction. Here it will be every time. Will be one specific instance.
I see.
Then during the couple of years ago, they also changed the definition of rape. You know, the left likes to redefine words. So now they are essentially calling things that used to be, you know, sexual assault or.
Is this the brown brown dashed line? Something happens around 2000 and it just sort of takes a dip. It's at minus 78%.
No, that's carjackings.
Oh, okay. That carjackings have just stopped in Sweden, apparently.
But the pink dotted line is like other sexual crime. So like,
you know, like well, that's more like, you know, if you people who what I don't know what you call it in English. It's
swindling. The pink dotted line is swindling, and then there's the dashed line is the miscellaneous sexual crimes.
That's actually, you know, inappropriate touching, stuff like that. But since the definition, they have essentially, so if you use some what used to be essentially called, you know, inappropriate touching, then go into the other category, that essentially is covered over rape here. And then they also have added to like things like, what do you call it, if you didn't have the nicest lay over like a couple of weeks ago. Now they are saying that you can retroactively just, you know, go and say that didn't feel. I said yes.
You can retroactively retract your consent.
But I don't feel good about it now, like half a year later. So now I can report it as a rape.
Jesus.
Is this where the sex contract apps come in?
Yeah. I said that when they first floated that law a couple of years prior. I said that, oh great, now you'll need to have forms. Go if you bring forms to the bar, and then have, you know, take a nip by the courthouse and the public notary to get it notarized before.
I'm sure if you're going to be a bartender in Sweden, you can be a notary at the same time. That's going to be a popular combination of lines of work.
It's really insane. But we should also say that this is reported crimes, so we should go to the conviction rates. The one that is called crime stats convictions, because there's let's just say women will be women, and there will be a lot of interesting ways of thinking about stuff.
Interesting. Again, this car thing in the bottom here. What is going on here?
Everybody's using public transport.
Yeah, that's why. It's the sharing economy. It's here.
Nah, I think it's mostly that it's been we had had a really large problem with car thieves from Finland who came over and drove them north and up and over and sold it to the Russians, and that has
really? Okay.
Good business.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that would actually make sense.
Weird, but it used to be, but it's kind of gone away.
Okay. So why don't we go through these
Well, you
lines
can
here?
the green is something the narcotics crimes.
Uh-huh.
The convictions are up 571%. This is also
From
because they are kind of
this is from 1975 though, but I mean you can
ah,
see it really
more or
starts
less.
going off around
Yeah.
2000.
Essentially, the police have always liked, and especially police management has always liked narcotic crimes because they are kind of easy to prove.
Uh-huh.
Did you have narcotics in your pocket? Yes, you
Yes,
did.
no. Yeah.
Yeah, your
Yeah, like
right,
spending weeks on like
your
a rape
eyes,
charge
your, your
is
pupils are the
difficult.
size of radar dishes, and your nose is frosted white. This is kind of an open shut case. So you get a lot of convictions with kind of little work.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So that's also kind of I think that is true all in the West, all over the Western world. That kind
Yeah,
of
and it
thing.
makes sense like things like swindle and I think this yellow one is this insurance
Damage.
fraud.
No,
What?
the purple dotted line, bedrägeri, 83%. That's fraud.
Ah, that's
The other
fraud.
one is,
Okay.
yeah, the yellow one is property damage.
Ah, property damage. Okay. Now the fraud one, I would agree with is probably one of those as well, where it might not be worth the effort to hunt it
Yeah,
down.
it's hard
Yeah.
to convict. It happens a
Also,
lot,
you
but
might accidentally, uh, discover something about some people who are sending money somewhere that you like. So it's better
yeah,
better to
yeah,
just not
there are problems.
pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Indeed. But you can also see the gray line there, that robberies, and these are
Uh-huh.
then not robberies that you rob, a house. These are person robberies. So you rob a person with
Okay. Yep. This is
under threat
breaking
of
and entering.
violence.
This is
This is stealing someone's wallet
Mhm.
while they are holding it.
Yeah.
The other one that are stealing from break-ins and burglaries. That's the blue dotted line, the upper one there. You see,
Okay. Yeah.
minus 63%.
It's mugging. Monophthalmos says yes.
Yeah, muggings.
That's what the English call it.
Mm.
That's 41%, and then rape is 65%.
Yeah,
Murder and killings
59.
69%. And then the carjackings is the last one. So there's a definite sort of like trend overall in what is going up and what is going down in the convictions here.
Yeah.
It's very violent crimes. It's stealing. It's narcotics. And sure, some of this might be that it's easier to convict than the others. But if you look at the previous one here, I mean, it matches to a large degree the reported crimes as well.
Mm.
So it's been a significant increase in
You should
sexual
look
crimes,
at the
in
photograph
rape,
on gun deaths, because
gun deaths.
that one essentially gives hard numbers, and then we don't have to speculate on who did it, because then we just know how many people are dead. So that is year by year.
Okay.
So this is not an aggregate graph. These are absolute numbers per year.
Yep. So
So you
what
see,
is this yellow line here?
the yellow line is the police, the numbers that the police are working with, and the red are the confirmed. So the yellow line contains some unverified data. The red dotted line is verified numbers.
I see. So this is the amount of gun deaths in Sweden, and that's been since 2005. If we were taking that as, because we have 1995, all right, let's say 15 then as the baseline here, and now we're up at 40. So yeah, that's more than doubling it over the course of 10, 15 years.
In the six, because last year I think the aggregate was like 160 people.
Right.
Because they have been, they have started a little gang war, so they are shooting each other. They are really killing off.
So again, this isn't like, it sounds weird to say it, but this isn't something that really affects ethnic Swedes, is it? You just move out of a certain town and then they're just shooting each other. Is that what you're saying?
You can essentially say that the 15 median line is, well, there you have, domestic disputes that go, go too far, things that, manslaughter charges mostly. It's like, we got into a fight and he fell badly. Well, did you punch him? Yeah, I punched him in the face and then he fell and hit his head. And yeah, manslaughter.
Well, this is gun death.
Manslaughter.
But I mean, even if this is if this is killings, I mean, how many people are there in Sweden?
10.5 million, 10.45.
Right. So 15 a year, if you also include manslaughter. I mean, ideally no one would die, of course, but I mean, some disputes and some unfortunate violence, I think, is to be expected at some point.
The thing is that essentially, if you scale this up towards, to comparatively to say the population of France, England, the US, fucking Brazil, these numbers are nothing, even when you control for population. But the thing is that that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is that it essentially didn't happen, and then you have this market rise over since essentially 2010.
Yeah, I would say maybe.
And you can see there again,
2013. That's where it starts going up.
Yeah, you see, it goes down. Essentially, we have this weird spike around 1998, and then it goes down, and 2005. Remember what happened there? 2005, the moderates essentially takes a haircut to our immigration laws, and
then it starts climbing slowly. Yeah, and then in 2013 to 2015, it goes up even more. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you could put up the one called Fatal Violence to get a bit more nuance to those numbers.
Fatal violence in Sweden. This is fatal violence in Sweden per 100,000 immigrants.
No, not immigrants. Population per 100,000.
Oh, yeah, I see. I read that wrong. Yeah, sorry. Also, Swedish isn't my...
So, and the upper blue line is then reported cases of deadly violence.
Okay, so the blue is the reported cases. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, these are reported cases. So these are actually people, the amount of people that have died in totality.
And then the red one, is that people arrested or convicted?
That is conviction for murder and manslaughter, the red line.
So contrasting the red and the blue one in and about around 2012 here and on, that's a pretty bleak disparity.
Yeah, because then you really have the narcotics trade gangs in the in the what they now call the no-go zones, so to speak, starts kicking off a number of conflicts between these comparatively young people. And then you will see the green line is then stated cases of deadly violence, but you don't know the reason or why they are dead, essentially. And then the purple line, of course, you have the deadly violence against women.
Yeah.
The yellow line is confirmed cases of murder with various cutting and stabbing implements. And the blue line furthest down is murder via shootings.
So would you say that Sweden doesn't have the knife thing that parts of England does? It's more gun violence. That's been the
Yeah, and the thing is, if you the reason that it is as cutting and stabbing is that it's actually more usual that you murder someone with an axe than with a
Well,
knife.
fair enough. Yeah. Well, they have an axe thing as well, so it was kind of bladed weapons. I guess we can call it that.
Yeah.
But that seems it's gone up a little bit, but compared to the gun violence, the bottom light blue line, it's going down a bit, but the gun violence is going up. And the violence against women seems to be trending down, but is this like a definition thing
Now,
or?
now this is deadly violence, violence with deadly outcome.
Ah, okay, so there are less women being murdered.
Well, I think they might be the same. It's just their proportion has gone down.
Well, fair enough.
Hmm.
But again, the big ones here are general violence on the green one, which follows the red one, which then has this huge disparity between
Yeah,
convictions and
essentially, you should say the topmost blue ones with our total numbers of dead people through violent acts. So
Yeah.
these are people who have died because they have been murdered, essentially.
Uh-huh.
And then you have the conviction rate, and the reason why it starts to you see in the 1980s up until the early to the early 2000s, you have the lines kind of follow each other, and then they start to delineate.
Right. Yeah, they're starting to there's some disparity, but it doesn't really kick off until like the 2000s. Well,
Yeah.
2005, I suppose.
Yeah, you can see there where you have
To get back to that old.
Yeah, you see if you follow the line and look at about the middle section, you can see up the lines start to delineate 2003, 2004, and then it really kicks off up into a small peak at 2005,
Yeah.
and then in 2006, 2007 it goes down again, and then it kicks off again.
Right. Jarl would like to add that robberies is something that very much affects ethnic Swedes.
Oh yeah, it does.
It's just not as much I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but just not as much the gun violence.
No, because they are different things. Because the gun law violence is essentially driven. That's driven by internal gang and conflicts and turf wars. So that's essentially various criminal enterprises that are locked in various conflicts with its own sphere, so to speak. So that's essentially where that comes from. However, robberies are very much coming from that group towards especially youth. So they steal, designer clothes, clocks, telephones, stuff like that, and beat them up for good measure. So that's a thing that's going on.
Yeah, that's scary. It's a scary thought. Now, you have one here called guns, which I'd like to pull up.
Ah, yes.
Because that might be relevant.
Yeah.
But this is the amount of registered firearms per 100 people in Europe.
Yep. So these are not illegal arms. We should go into that. We are now going into the
yeah, that's true. And I know for a fact that in Norway that one is a lot bigger than it looks like, because there's a lot of unregistered firearms floating around. The police regularly have sort of no questions asked roundups of guns where people can just either send in or deliver guns at a depot. Without any markings or tags.
Yeah, it's mostly to get back, because people have so many old unregistered hunting rifles and shotguns lying about, grandpa's or dad's stuff that weren't registered.
That's mostly it, yeah.
stuff like that. And so it's probably
But
a
also
lot.
a lot of people like have them from like it's old army equipment that they somehow just managed to bring back home, and so they just have like old military rifles.
Yeah, I know.
There was at least in Finland post-war, there was this big movement by people to stash weapons in the ground, hidden all over the place. So that is also a very big thing. I would also bet that Eastern Europe totally doesn't have this few guns. I mean, this is just
No, that's also why these are registered firearms. So these are essentially sporting guns and hunting rifles, stuff like that.
But that is also something that is, brought up from time and time again on the left, that people are owning too many guns. But looking at the Nordic countries, you can clearly see that the amount of guns isn't the issue here, or the amount of rifles.
No, not really. I mean, it's just the same old thing that all the commies want. They don't want anyone to have guns except for the state, because then they can really lay it at you. But I think we should perhaps look into the election maps as well, just for you. People can get a sense of how people actually voted for the. We can start with the.
This is for the
EU. The blue and red one, the EU one, EU election map.
This one, yep. So this is Sweden's vote for the European Union in 1994.
So yes, and the blue one is no. And well, you can see how it's the more urban the area, the happier they were about joining the EU. The more rural the area, the more negative they were. So
that tracks the that tracks everything else, doesn't it?
Yeah, and if you take up the other one where you can see this is about about the euro, joining the euro, that we had a referendum on.
Right.
And here you can see it's essentially
this is the eurozone, as in the currency, right?
Yeah, joining the currency.
Yeah.
So this is essentially, you can see the green ones is for yes and the red one is for no. So you can see it's the greater Gothenburg area, the greater Stockholm area, and the area around Malmö and up towards the periphery of that one. And for some reason, one of the up in West Bothnia, there was one municipality with like.
Isn't this Haparanda?
Yeah, Haparanda.
But yeah, that little green guy at the top
there, no one understands why.
Huh.
I don't know. The only reason I know Haparanda is because it's the Finnish destination for buying snus. So
That's
where you do sort of your.
Yeah. You can't buy it in Finland, right? It's illegal.
Yeah, it's illegal to sell, but there's a big.
Oh, really?
Big illegal trade. There's actually been a sort of because in Finland you can at 15 years old you're allowed to drive mopeds, and recently they brought these the seniors drive these 50 cubic centimeter and diesel engined moped cars. And there's been 15-year-olds driving with these moped cars onto Swedish ferries, filling the whole car with snus and running, underage snus mafia in Helsinki.
Jesus.
And there's actually, been people killed with axes and stuff over these kids running this underage snus mafia. But yeah, Haparanda and the ferries are quite tight. The ferries are tighter with the security, but there has actually been police stationed at the Haparanda border as well, and they stop the moped cars if they're filled to the brim with snus.
Well, concerning border dispute, we should perhaps talk a little about defense. So can you take up the picture that is called Hunt's Sub?
Oh, yep.
So anyway,
So this is roughly translated. It's "Get out, you fucking U-boats" or something like that.
Yeah, no, it's a "Come out."
Oh, come out, fucking U-boats.
And for those who doesn't understand,
submarines, yeah.
Yeah, submarines. So that's a clip picture of the king when he's out hunting moose.
Yes.
And it's something of a subculture in Sweden to make memes of the king because he's highly meme worthy.
I've seen some pictures, yes.
Yeah. It's usually about, coming up with funny hats and photoshopping them on him for some reason. So in any case, they have...
This is your line of defense against the Russians, is that what
Yeah. It's an old cranky man that says non-politically correct stuff. Yeah. Well,
do you want me to put up the other one, or do you want to talk about defense more?
Well, since we mentioned the hat, you should get.
Okay, we can talk about defense after, but I like the moose hat.
Yeah,
here.
I think that one is actually that one is actually not the Photoshop one. I think he put it on for
this
fun.
Looks very real, yeah.
Yeah. That one I think that started the funny hat trope. So. He essentially, someone had it. They were doing something about starting the elk hunt for the season, and someone gave it. It was there, and he just thought it would be fun to just put it on for a moment and say something, and then take it off again and put on his usual.
It says here in the text, to hunt an elk, you must think like an elk.
Yeah.
So there you go. And I want to show some respect at least. They're the royal family, I suppose.
Yeah, that's the line of succession at least. So it's the king, the crown,
of course, yeah.
and the crown princess' oldest child.
Now, I don't know if we talked about this Luddic path at some point in our streams, but I remember having a conversation with someone if in Norway, because we have a crown princess and her daughter as well as the line of succession coming further down, whether or not our monarchies would survive that long, if it can survive another generation, essentially.
I don't think we had that talk, but I'm not even sure how this works. What's going to come of it? We could do a stream on the royals at some point.
Yeah, that would be interesting. If we haven't talked about it, then that's an opportunity for a stream.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's such a tricky topic, and there's so many ideas that's an entire stream of itself.
Yeah, it brushes into philosophy as well, especially considering the Norwegian monarchs are not the same monarchs that historically were our monarchs, because they're essentially like the Danes, or we had to steal like the Danish prince for our own. So it's like a fake quote unquote monarchy, in the sense that there's no line of succession going back thousands of years to the Norwegian soil, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, the Swedish one, I believe, is descended from a Napoleonic general. So, I mean, how... I don't know, the revolutionary element in a monarchy is.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. The previous king before that adopted the Napoleon's general. I think it was one of his favorite generals that we managed to snap up. And then they kind of married him off with one of the female. So they kind of interbred with the old local royal lines and stuff like that on the female side. So
Right.
Stuff like that. But that we can go into that for,
That's an entire different stream. Yeah.
in the royal
on
stream.
topic.
I have a conspiracy theory about the last Swedish king in the proper line as well. So,
okay. What do you want to get into next, Leo? Did you want to talk more about defense? I know we skipped some of it with the memes.
Yeah, if you want to, I mean, it's not really much to say. I mean, we had a large army and a large air force and a large navy up until the end of the Cold War, and then we successively kind of what do you say? Well, got rid of it, and then in 2014, when the thing in Ukraine kicked off the first round, everyone in Parliament kind of woke up with startled eyes. Oh, do we have an army? And the answer was no. We have an air force and some submarines. We kind of don't have an army really. And then it's has been slowly been refinanced, and they have been building it up, and they just took a decision to take it up to give it more money. So now we are putting, going forwards, 2% of our BNP into defense, and there's talks about bringing it back to 3% that we had during the Cold War, when we up until the mid 1960s actually had the world's fourth largest air force.
Fourth largest. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I think the defense agreement between Sweden and Finland has been pretty long standing. It's been how many years? I don't remember exactly when it started, but it's been intensifying, since 2014 a lot. And I've been the Finnish defense forces publish a lot of propaganda about this cooperation with Sweden, since we are not in NATO yet.
Yeah, I think it was a couple of years ago. I think it was last year that we formalized a military alliance. So we are essentially having Finland and Sweden actually have a small mini NATO of our own. Yeah, and I think we have something similar with the Danes. So they are by proxy also in this.
What you're saying is everything is pretty much set up for another world war. In the classic sort of. Let's all pile on through a series of alliances.
There's a provision, I think, in this that we won't do anything if Article 14 of the NATO agreement is invoked for Denmark, because then the Danes rely on the Americans, because if the NATO gets involved, then we don't want to be involved.
No, that's good. I was afraid that a rocket going astray somewhere could trigger a new world war.
And there are also rumblings of getting back into the post World War II idea that our Prime Minister Tage Erlander was trying to champion. That was essentially a Scandinavian NATO before there was a NATO, but then things kind of fell apart. Those talks, when NATO came along and Norway joined immediately.
Yeah, I think Paasikivi especially was really on for that Nordic cooperation, but our Norwegian friends were quickly peeled off, and then we were peeled off, and that fell apart.
Yeah, that was the way that it happened. So essentially, that basic idea formalized in a non-military alliance in the shape of the Nordic Council in 1952.
Right.
So it became more of a national cooperation and economic cooperation rather than a military one, because that was with the Finland's position with Stalin, and Norway and Denmark in NATO. Well, at that point, only Norway. It was essentially an untenable position that we had been put in to create a military alliance for the entire Scandinavian region, because neither the Russians, well, then Soviets, nor the Americans would have it. So.
Okay. I have a couple of more images here. One is about COVID, and one is with Castro. Is there anything you want to highlight?
Well, we can take up the Castro one, because that's essentially, people can say that we're a center party and we are Democrats and such, but they're all socialists, really. This is one of our then Prime Minister Olof Palme in his visit to Cuba in 1975. So, kind of a this was also a reason why he lost the 1976 election, because people were like, what the fuck are you doing?
He's going full commie, and people are starving. Yeah.
Which is worse, Olof Palme here with Castro, or Kekkonen's face with Kim Il Sung?
Ludwig, do we have any like Garretson with any Soviet or communist leaders?
I was thinking
feel
of
like
the
we're
same
not
thing.
part of the club here.
I can't think of anyone.
No.
We missed out on something.
We missed out. Yeah, we had the possibility to be part of the commie club here, but
yeah, but I mean, just look at the deceitful the deceitful chin and the.
Oh yeah, this guy is. He has a lying face. That's
very much so.
True.
Yeah, the beady eyes.
Yeah, and this is after he corrected his teeth. I was trying to find, but I couldn't find the pictures of him smiling when he was a bit younger, from the early 70s, before he corrected. He was he had teeth surgery because he had this really, really British kind of teeth thing going on before this. So
yeah, there's some Palpatine in that smile, I gotta say.
Yeah, I mean, he is also, I think, no political leader in Sweden has before him or after him been despised like he was, because people a segment of the population, I mean, hated him with the fire of 1,000 suns. And then he did get shot as well, so
yeah, I was going to say, the only reason I know who he is, from Norway is the same reason of the hate and eventually, the violence.
I think he was the sole reason the Finnish immigration waves from the early 60s, 70s stopped, because people in Finland were getting letters back from Sweden. It's not better over here. This dude is nuts.
Yeah, he really tried to sneak in communism with the so-called. There we have it.
This is a deeply subversive picture.
Yeah.
Ooh, I would not. That's
yeah, you can.
I would not trust this goblin with my money.
Yeah, you can take the other picture that I sent you. That is of his predecessor, Tage Erlander, who ruled from 1946 to 1969, when he.
Nothing else. That's much stronger jaw.
Yeah, that's a trustworthy jaw right there.
Yeah.
Solid nose.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, he was also consequently to bring it around. Tage Erlander is one of the most universally loved politicians we have ever had in this country, because he was that kind of let's try to do the right thing. And I know one reason he won his last election in 19.
Well, I'm going to go back, because Norman says that he looks like a Burton villain, and he's right. He reminds me of the Penguin from the Batman movie.
Yeah. Well, essentially, he essentially won an election they had some reform. I don't remember what it was. It was something, and it had gone spectacularly wrong. And he went out on like the premier news show of the mid 60s, where they had like a sit down that kind of American style that they were trying out.
So like a late night show kind of deal.
Yeah, and he essentially sat down and took us with him, and they asked him about this thing, because, well, you have to address the elephant at some point. And he just says straight up, yeah, that didn't go well at all. That was not what we intended. It failed spectacularly, and we have to roll it back and, try to look at it again and see if we can get, and then he starts to explain what the outcome was supposed to be, and then everybody goes, yeah, that sounds like kind of a good idea, but well, and he just trashes his own position. And the party just, the wail of fury that came from the party ranks, you could hear it all over the nation. But people loved him for it, because he essentially said, yeah, we fucked up majorly. We're gonna try to.
That's rare to get out of a politician, right? So,
yeah.
But as you said, it's would you call it a trustworthy nose? I mean,
square jaw.
Square jaw. That's true.
Yeah, and it was a tall man. I think it was 6 foot, 6'4", 6'5", something like that.
Yeah.
He was a big guy.
Senator Armstrong phenotype.
Senator Armstrong. Yeah. Hang on, I have the clip. Let me play it.
Nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
There we go. I love that clip.
Yeah, and Elander was also big into the essentially keeping the world out, in a sense. He was very native. He was very pro-nativist and trying to get in reforms like monetary aid for new mothers and giving mothers more time to after giving birth, they given more time off to spend with their child at essentially government dime. So, and this was kind of the idea was that they shouldn't be separated and forced into the workforce during the 60s. So they should spend time at home with their children as much as they can. And if the economic situation can't really hold up that equation, then the government should subsidize them being home with their kids.
That's pretty based on some degrees. It's a strange. It's one of those things where it's like, yes, I want the same as the leftist in the room, but I want it in the based way. Moments, and that's like a lot of the pro-natalist. I feel like there's a lot of overlap there.
I see that is it Mongolian Doggerland on a new account?
No, he keeps changing his name. That's it.
Yeah, no Sami representation. Well, that's because the Sami aren't Nordic. They are.
That's true.
Yeah, except for the ones that are, which are most of them, because most of them don't have any what do you call it? Sami, Siberian blood. They're just Germanics who wear blue suits when someone comes by with a camera for tax reasons. So
yeah, I think most of them are in northern Norway and Finland. Yeah, there's not many of them in Sweden.
Yeah, no. I think the real Sami population, if you will say, from an ethnic point of view, should be in northern Finland and out on the Kola Peninsula in Russia, actually.
Yeah, Russia, Finnmark, and
and that kind of region. What can we say? It's always kind of funny when they keep going on about the Sami, the indigenous population, and you're the last population to arrive if we're not counting the new arrivals from the Middle East. So.
Right. Yeah, no, there's quite a lot of history to be found in the southern reaches of Norway that stretches back quite a bit longer than you claim. I'm sorry. All right.
Yeah. Oh, essentially, it's a political construct, but hey, what can you do?
Sure.
Also, we should
have one last one here. Sorry. Yep.
We should say something about migration again, just to show that it was an interesting stat, just to do the urban versus rural thing again. So only 16% of migrants live outside urban area, the core urban zones in Sweden. And almost all of those migrants, as we looked on the previous charts, are either Finns, Poles, or some other kind of German or Dutch who have escaped their urban hellscapes down on the continent and come up here.
They came to fish 24/7 probably.
Yeah, more or less. So essentially, if you go out in the countryside here, it's still rare to find someone who isn't very pale.
Interesting. Now, a difference from that in Norway is that there's been quite a bit of effort to, in the name of integration, what they've done at times is they have asylum hospices or living quarters or etc. that they build in pretty remote villages, and sort of they dump, for a lack of a better word, a bunch of asylum seekers into these homes, and pretty much like half the population of this tiny town is now Syrians. It's like, all right, well, that's a challenge. So that's been quite interesting, but the effect is, I suppose, that you avoid some of the concentration that you've seen in the major cities that turn into sort of gang violence, etc.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you will find small, not small, but mid-sized rural towns, the people who are there are usually people who came during the wars on the Balkans or something like that, and they usually run a pizza parlor and have been here since the 90s, and
that's
like that.
Or a kebab shop. That's usually
something like that. That's the usual. That's kind of the only rural only rural non-Germanics that you will find.
Yeah.
Of course, there's the odd exceptions here and there, but as a general trend.
Now, you have one more image in here, which is something that I know from a Norwegian perspective, the press has given you a lot of shit about, which was your handling of COVID.
Yes, that one.
Because while at least Norway did the full song and dance with the lockdowns, etc., Sweden decided on a much more laissez-faire, let's say, approach to the pandemic.
Slightly more sane.
Yes. Let me... Here we go. And so you shared this as the cumulative excess death. I don't know what they mean by excess death in 2021.
It's essentially excess of aggregate median death per year.
Okay. I see.
Per 100,000 population.
And so Sweden is pretty much at the bottom here for 2021. Which means that your approach seems to have worked out well. How has your vaccination stuff been going?
I think about 65-67% of the population has had at least one jab. But the thing is that it seems like kind of a lot of people have drops off at the first one, because I had one, why should I get another one? That sounds like insanity. So if you go for the second, then it's a much larger number, and almost no one has gone for the third.
Right. But so that helps to sort of, I mean, it's too little too late, but it seems that the lockdowns didn't really do that much.
No, of course not. I mean, as someone said, we were essentially the only country that stuck to the plan. Because what we did was essentially not importing that Chinese lockdown theory, but we essentially went with the old pandemic planning, and our pandemic planning didn't look any different than yours or any other European country. Everybody just panicked and changed it, and we didn't.
Right.
Our politicians, of course, most certainly wanted to change it because, God knows they panicked, but they weren't allowed to do it. So
Yeah. Nordano says in 2020 the media would have you believe that the death rate was near Black Plague proportions, and I agree. Some of the images, I was talking to someone at work about how afraid they were back in March 2020, and I can certainly understand it when you look at the absolute, incredibly horrifying lies that the media were printing in terms of like the images coming out of Italy, etc., and who turned out to be completely false from different events, etc.
Yeah,
purely to drum up hysteria. And in
like these,
in a better time,
machines.
these journalists might have been punished harsher for this, but
I like to look at the Wayback Machines. You go through like 2020, 2021. Just look at the headlines in some of these.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. Probably at some point, someone else and me will just compile some type of story of how this went down. But I'm curious, how was the media pressure, like the media landscape inside of Sweden when this was going on? Were they trying to just push for more lockdowns and shaming people, or did they have a more relaxed attitude?
I would say that the left-wing media, so essentially all the media, were trying to push some kind of lockdown and, trying to drum up hysterics, essentially.
Did it work? I mean, not for like the policy, but like the regular Swede. You had like these kind of more lefty, media savvy people who were just locking themselves inside.
I think most people kind of just in the early stages during the spring 2020, since no one knew, people kind of on their own took to the idea that I kind of not go out as much because I don't have enough data to make a decision about it. So you just risk mitigate until you know more. But once from towards the summer, people weren't using masks in public transportation or in public areas and stuff like that. So I think I saw somewhere that an aggregate study said that the mask compliance were 5 to 6% in urban areas and almost 0 in non-urban areas.
Huh.
That sounds refreshing, honestly.
Yeah. I noticed in Norway it fell off during the summer times as well, but one of the strange quirks of our culture is the way that the government pretty much just says, "Oh, time to do the mask thing," and people do the mask thing, and then they say, "No, we're done. The pandemic is over," and everybody sort of just goes back to normal. Like we're pretty much back to how it was before 2020. And it just happened overnight just because the government was like, "Oh, pandemic over," and everybody went, "All right."
Yeah.
And in one sense, it's refreshing. In the other, it's incredibly terrifying that we're just like, okay, whatever you say.
Yeah, I think people here started to, once they started to fuck around with, so people were kind of okay with, okay, no people at the football games because we cannot fill the arena. Okay, fine. But you got to close the bars at 10? Why? I mean, everybody knew that was, the politicians desperately trying to, quote unquote, do something, even if it was completely.
At least it's 10. We got ours closed at I think it was 6. What is that?
I remember a huge thing about our bars going from being open to 2, Luddick? I think it's different per city.
Yes.
But it went from 2 to 1 a.m. and people were losing it, and then it went to like 12:30 a.m. or something, and people were like, "Oh my god, what are we gonna do?" And and then they had to open back up again, but then they locked down restaurants even harder later, so then it didn't matter anymore. So because apparently if you just close down, like closing the bar an hour early is my freedoms, but just closing the bar like forever, basically, no, that's fine.
Yeah. No, I think after the first summer, the summer 2020, before that, a lot of people were kind of ambivalent because they didn't really know what was going on, and the media was really pushing it hard. That is, it was the next Black Death, really. Everyone was going to die. But the thing was that they pushed it so fucking hard. I think a lot of people here were just looking at it and going like, no. What? It's completely unreasonable because people, went to the Alps for travel. So a lot of people knew people that had it early in the spring of 2020.
Yeah, same here.
Hadn't gotten that sick. So it created this kind of cognitive dissonance. But you had, the women and the liberals who wanted to follow everything the government says. But then you have this larger part of the population that, sitting doesn't really like the government, which is more Swedes actually. And then just it's too much work. Fuck it. So people didn't mask, and people kind of more or less lived their lives as nothing had changed. I mean, there were some provisions made for, pensioners and, old people and stuff like that they had at some convenience stores, food stores, they had only pensioners and people like that in the mornings up until lunch. But that was only like, please come, you young people can come in the afternoon. Let the old timers go to the store and have it to themselves during the early parts of the day, because you're all at work anyway. So
there was some talk about, I don't know if that was an actual like thing here, but
some stores did it as a recommendation, but if you wanted to nip in during that,
nobody like controlled anything. I'm sure. I don't think I ever saw anyone talk to anyone else about like, oh, you don't, or me for that matter, like, oh, why don't you have a mask on, or why do you have like there's been nothing of that here. Like you see the Americans like fighting all the time about the mask stuff.
I think if you're in Oslo or some of these places, it was more frequent.
Probably
some of these confrontations.
Probably.
And, I mean, for myself, I don't live in Oslo, but somewhere it's slightly adjacent. And I mean, I came to the point I was just getting really sick of just seeing faces with masks. I try to avoid these kind of middle class grocery stores because everybody's basically masked. That would be the only guy maskless. You get a lot of bad looks, but I wasn't reprimanded.
Yeah, that's pretty much my experience too. But then again, I live further from the capital as well, so it was not as drummed up, I suppose.
No, I could say since I live in Stockholm, the only people that I ever saw with masks, I don't barely see anyone at all now. During the what do we call it, quote unquote, peak pandemic, it was essentially old people who. It was kind of sensible, I guess, to have some extra precaution, even if it doesn't really help all that much. And women with blue hair.
Right.
That's about it.
Well, that's a key demographic probably of the pandemic militia.
So like
all right.
Fat women with blue hair, or just regular women with blue hair?
I think they're probably are on the heavy side, because but then again, all the blue-haired women tend to trend towards the tank phenotype rather than the slim one.
So Burkarl shared in the private chat here, considering this is very good work, considering you did one for the Finland stream too, Burkarl. This is the 7 races of Sweden. I am not sure where this is, like, who, because the other one was based on like real people. I don't know about this one.
The memes themselves I found on some random Discord server years ago, and I for the Finland one I matched up with searches of people, but I didn't do that with the Sweden one.
I will say though that I have seen, like, to start in the top left, this person definitely exists.
I thought maybe Leo could tell us how accurate this is.
Yes.
Let's see here. The basic Swede. Yeah, that's accurate. The get, what would that be? Ja, det är Göte, kanske.
Yeah, that sounds like it.
Yeah. Well, that looks like most people in Gothenburg, so I guess that's correct.
Yeah, Geet, Goth, that's the same thing. Different English term.
The Norrlander is, well, kind of...
Relocate the very second the Blatt moves into his neighborhood. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, that's really true. I mean, then you gotta move before the house prices go down.
Uh-huh. So the Norrlander, is that sort of like the working class Northman vibes here? Is that it?
Yeah. It's cold in the winter, lots of mosquitoes in the summer, and, well...
Female population approaching 0.
Well, that is probably the only thing that isn't true there, so...
Right. So the Scanian, is that very...
around Malmö.
That's very, very true, okay.
The reserve Danes.
Fiercely nationalistic while also wanting to secede from the country.
Yeah. There's actually a movement, a cultural movement that is called Gräv bort Skåne, which means dig away Scania.
Oh.
by the East Gothia Scania border each summer, with shovels and a digger each year, and are digging a trench.
Basically trying to remove themselves. I like it.
Yep.
Maybe Burkarl is...
They are not Scanians. They are just trying to get rid of them.
Right.
In a symbolic kind of sense.
Uh-huh. Maybe Burkarl has more info on the next one, the Sweden Finn.
Yeah, I think when we looked at the Tavastian in the previous one, it had a slow to anger and slow to forgiveness, but the Sweden Finn here seems to be quick to anger and quick to violence.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know what has happened here.
Yeah, he's out of his natural element.
Yeah, he's confused and lost, lashing out.
He's on the wrong side of the Baltic, and it feels weird.
Yeah, probably.
There's a lack of saunas around, probably.
Oh no,
the bastu there's probably enough bastu, but they're probably too cold.
They're too cold, right? They're for weak Swedes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you have is it Blatt or Blatte?
Blatte.
Blatte. Okay. So this is the new Finn, isn't it?
Yeah.
From the previous one. But this one has this isn't the Somali head shape, to put it that way. This is much more the Iraqi.
The Iraqi, the Mesopotamian Persian kind of phenotype.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So it's the Iraqi, the Iranian kind of thing.
Sure. Eating pork is around, dealing with rape is not. Congregates in parallel societies surrounded by skin. Possible future doctor or scientist. That's we'll see. And then there's the Sami. What do you think, Leo?
That's probably the most accurate one, actually.
Great step grandmother was half Sami.
I like the ancestry works via the nun drop rule and the
the nun drop rule.
Yeah.
The Norrlander and the Swedenfin both have more Sami ancestry.
Now, what's this about his reindeer being struck by lightning?
Well, because they get paid by the government for holding those things, and they are kind of worth more to them dead or alive if they die in accidents, like being run over train, hit by lightning, scared and startled to death by sudden loud noises.
Sure. Now we have something like that too, Ludwig, but I'm not sure if it's lightning. But I remember there was something about that here as well.
Yep.
Operates his own shadow government. That's same as in Norway, basically, where they have their own land and own government.
I know it's a bit different.
Rule.
They have the thing called the Sami thing. But,
same here.
Yeah, but it doesn't have any actual power, so it's more like a cultural kind of thing. They LARP that they have a government that decide things, but they don't really decide anything. So they just send lists of things they want to the government, and the government kind of tends to ignore them as much as it can, because
put it in the basket with the others.
Yeah.
With all the other rent seekers, because that's about it. And of course, they always the Holocaust victim is very, very, very true, because they keep bringing up that during the late 18th and early 19th centuries, some of them got their skull shapes documented, and some ethnologists raided some old graves on some mountain somewhere and stole bones and skulls and stuff like that.
I see.
So they have been Holocausted.
We was Hebrews.
All right, this one
well,
was great.
considering the zero drop rule, they are probably authentically more Hebrew than they are Sami.
I'm gonna have to make one for Norway just to complete the set, and get one for Denmark as well. Maybe we'll look into it. Now we're out of pictures, and we're
coming up on 3 hours.
Coming up on 3 hours. So I'm thinking we're gonna just chat for 10 minutes and take any questions that the chat may have.
I did promise we would throw in some red meat here.
You sent me a video.
Link in the chat here. So
yeah,
there's some. As you can see, a couple of minutes of this. It's from like a Swedish Black Lives Matter protest. Those funny characters.
They actually prosecuted, I think, all the instigators of those rallies, and convicted them.
Let's see here. If I can.
Which was kind of weird.
What were the charges?
I think it was unlawful assembly and demonstrating without a permit. So it was essentially
nothing.
Civic service and fines. I think they drummed the police girl who took the one police girl who took the knee. They drummed her out of the force too. She was a trainee at the time, I think, but they kind of kicked her out.
Asked her to leave
after a year.
Surprisingly based for Sweden.
So this is 30 minutes, but I'm told the 2 first minutes were the good stuff.
You get the guy with the Rastafari suit.
Oh yeah, that guy.
I'm just gonna let it play.
Yeah,
Okay.
just play for a couple of minutes.
Bring the cringe, man. Bring the cringe.
My blood is not mixed, but I give you people my mix, my nice blood. Very beautiful children.
I want to share something with you. And I want to share with all of you guys.
It's not about you.
No. It's not
about you.
No.
Sit down and have a black person come up.
I want to share something.
It's not about you.
No, it's not about you.
Who are you?
Who are you? Okay. I want to say something.
Who are you?
I am Anders Zachrisson, and I'm a Swedish man. And I want to say, as the representation of the Swedish people, that we have failed to take you home.
You're gonna get so many women, my dude.
Have failed. We have done that.
Come to Africa. Steal our grandparents. Steal our money. Steal our gold. Steal everything from us.
We have.
What did the Swedes steal from the Africans? Leo?
Nothing.
We are sick.
That's why I want to come
We
here.
are sick.
And I want to ask you for
We
forgiveness.
are sick.
I want to
We
ask.
are sick.
I want to ask you for forgiveness. We have failed to take care of you all.
Say whatever you want. No, we're not gonna listen. She's gonna say whatever she wants. No, listen. No. She's gonna say whatever she wants. Shut the fuck up. Now shut the fuck up.
There.
Yes.
Yeah, you could see, if you go back a little, you see the one white girl there, where you can see she has the...
Oh, it's like a triple.
Yeah, it's the
Is that
extremely liberal person.
hang on, is that a flu shot thing?
Yeah, that's a vaccination thing.
I didn't want to say the word, but yeah, that's a vaccination thing, and she ticks all the boxes.
Yep, gotta catch them all.
Did we get to the point you wanted to, Ludwig, or is it further in?
We can go a few more minutes because they start approaching the police.
Okay.
A little bit later.
I gotta say, there's something very weird about a bunch of people standing in a circle, recording on their phones, chanting Black Lives Matter.
I mean, they were at their throats, each other's throats about.
Yeah, but it's
seconds
this
ago.
weird, like, performative, strange thing. Yeah.
Yes,
It's very LARPy.
the religion.
Yeah. But the phones are included because we have to share it with everyone.
Yeah, you have to show that you are virtuous. How would anyone know if you haven't documented it?
Yeah, right. It's nothing
That's
new. I just keep losing hope every time.
But these are like Swedish Somalis, or do they come from somewhere else?
I don't think this guy is, but he's
No,
a
not
man
this guy, but
so
I
I
think
don't
the
think he has
guy
anything
that-
better to be.
No, I
So-
think the most of the people that we have seen so far should, considering the phenotype, be from Eritrea.
Yeah, there was a lot of Eritrea.
That guy is from Somalia. You see the light
Yeah, you
bulb
can
shape.
see here.
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
The guy beside him that you can see up in the upper right corner, not Somalia, I think. That's Eritrean.
Yeah, you can see it. Yeah. But there's a lot of Swedes here as well, in between mostly women. And manlets.
There's everything from us. So I just want to say, America is for everybody.
Weird international.
America is for everybody.
Who wants to tell her?
Like, this guy is okay. He might not be born in Sweden, right? But you can see this guy has like grown up in Sweden. Why the fuck would he care about this? You know?
Brownie points.
Yeah, right. Of course, but I just keep getting annoyed by this. This is why I can't watch these things. I just fall into the trap every time.
That is why you can't watch these things. I mean, there's plenty of other reasons that should already.
Black people pick America. I want to
Yeah, I concur with you, Ross. Here, I mean, every time I watch something like this, I start going into Uncle Ted country.
Let's get to the police bit. Or was it this guy you wanted to?
I don't have the timestamp exactly, so maybe you can just click through there.
Because they steal us. They steal us.
Come on, man. Come on, man.
We need you.
You have to stop.
I think around 7 minutes.
Here we go.
They push the police back, and you see like they're taking parts of the police vans.
There you can see the hooded black bloc toy boys mixed in. We're just coming out to, throw rocks.
The handler.
Run away right away after throwing.
Slip back into the crowd.
And here comes the bomb.
Did she just said like, was that like a didn't do nothing moment? All right, I'm gonna stop here. I mean, we get
I
the
think you've seen
gist.
The cringe.
30 minutes of that if you want to have a good time. Okay, if there's any questions from the chat, please post them here or in the chat. This was a little bit of a different overview than we usually have done. They've been a lot more deep dive into the politics, but it's hard to approach Sweden these days without asking these questions. So if nothing else, we have a good place to start to look further into the current goings on in future episodes, or if we ever do like a history thing on Sweden, we have some modern context as well. I was hoping you would play the Lost of Chicken video. Vingel, it features in the meme opening version of the Longhouse. So every time you watch, if you go back and watch the other episodes of the Longhouse, you usually will get a couple of seconds of the Lost of Chicken, I think. if I remember correctly, or maybe I took it out. No, I took it out. I'm sorry. You're gonna have to enjoy that on your own time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's probably not that favored by the algorithm.
That's that's what I was thinking. I'm not gonna play it on the stream. Doesn't seem to be any follow-up questions right now. So I think on that note, I think we're just gonna bow out. I'm getting tired myself. Thank you to Leo and Burkarl, and of course Luddic Path, as always, for coming on the stream and for sharing this knowledge with us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me again. It's always fun to stream with you guys.
Thank you. Likewise. Do you have any social media you want to share before we end the stream?
Not currently.
Nope. Okay. On that note, thank you for joining us. Have a nice evening or a day if you're listening to this at a later point, and we'll see you next time.